for CD40's congressional seat, and will have 5 minutes to introduce herself. Christina Gagne.
Well, good evening. I have to say, this is one of the biggest Democratic clubs I've ever been to, and I can already tell this is a force of nature. So thank you all for being here this evening. And what I will say is that I was a school board member. I was on the Chino Valley School Board. And you might have heard of Chino Valley School Board. We have a reputation, not when I was the board president, but we are definitely a board that the culture wars that have enveloped our public schools took over. What I will say is a school board meeting in Chino Valley is much like a town hall, because it just turned into a town hall, because people would come and whatever we did, they held us accountable. So during COVID, even if we were trying to keep kids safe, we had people who were angry. We were held accountable. We made decisions about extending learning time to help with COVID. We were held accountable. We stood the line to protect LGBTQIA students, and we stopped people from bullying those students. But we were also on the front lines being accountable. Where is young Kim being accountable? And the problem is she's not. Instead of making decisions in DC, which are tearing up the fabric of this community, tearing the fabric of this district, and ruining lives, she's hiding in DC, and she's not facing people. What I'm going to say is this. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, the Republican Party are bullying every single family in America and every single family in this district. And what I will commit to you is I have a career of standing up to bullies. I have a track record of standing up to bullies, and I'm going to stand up to the ultimate bully in this district, who's young Kim. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey as a school board member and my journey of standing up to bullies. So my school board got hit by the culture wars. We had outside forces come in and try to derail and attack our students and attack our parents. And it could have been really easy for me to say, you know what, I'm just going to go with the flow. But I was elected to be a school board member and represent every single kid that walked through the door of every single one of our schools. And even if it meant losing my job, which I did, I lost my seat because I stood up for students and made sure they were protected in our schools, I would lose that seat again and again. Why? Because the Democrats have to stand up and make the hard choices and stand up for the people they represent. This is quintessential right now. And sometimes those choices don't work out for you as an individual, but they work out better for the community. And that's what representation is. And after I lost that school board seat, I also could have said, you know what, that wasn't a great experience. But I looked out to my local community and said, we need leadership. We need to fight back. And what I experienced in the Chino Valley actually was a national problem. National groups, the Republican Party, are trying to destroy public education. School by school, parent by parent, teacher by teacher, they are undermining the institution that is the fabric of this country. They want to cut $338 billion from our public schools. They are firing half of the staff of the Department of Education. Our public schools won't function. So one of my commitments is I will keep standing up to bullies. I will make sure that we defend public education. It is an equalizer in this country, and 87% of families rely on it. But I also had a career standing up to bullies. So as a lawyer, my career is actually defending women and children who are harassed. And so I have a career of standing up to bullies and giving my victims a voice. That when no one else represents them, no one else will go to court with them, I will stand side by side and say, this is not okay, this is not right, you're going to be held accountable. And finally, I'm also the chair of the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce, which some people hear that coming out of a Democrat's mouth and say, how did that happen? How are you the chair of your local Chamber of Commerce? Well, our chamber's different. We want everyone in our community to live, work, and thrive. And so instead of being the chamber's sort of stereotype of meet and greets and mingling, yeah, there's some of that, of course. We invested in workforce development. We invested in our small business owners. We invested in our formerly incarcerated. We invest in our students. We want to make sure we bridge the gap between the people who live in the community and the businesses. The other thing we did is we're building broad coalitions. You also wouldn't think the Chamber of Commerce works with labor. We brought labor to the table. We work together day in and day out to make sure every person in our community can have a job in our community and can live, work, and thrive in our community. But those require broad coalitions. Right now, young Kim is allowing Donald Trump to tear at the fabric of our community. He is going to take away health care that helps people survive and live in this community. He's taking literally lunch out of children's mouths in public school. He is suggesting that people should not have affordable housing, that they should not have access to good paying jobs. He is imposing tariffs on small businesses who are literally trying to figure out what's going on, because not only are the decisions incompetent and inconsistent, they are downright cruel. What is happening right now in the United States is cruel and not reflective of who we are as a country. Who's in this room right now is reflective of who we are as a country. And we have an opportunity with the seat to take that back. And that's the path we have right now. So my background, and I'm happy to share more about myself, but I also want to share a story. And I identify with the story because I work with public school parents every day, and I see a lot of my family in these public school parents. So when I was 12 years old, my dad passed away. This is not the sad story candidate time where I tell you something with a little violin. I'm saying this because we could not afford health insurance. We could not afford basic things to keep my father alive. I was talking to a public school parent that I work with through my organization, Our Schools USA, just a few days ago. I'm hearing literally the exact same story. It's over 30 years later. Why has nothing changed in this country? It's because we are allowing people, we are allowing systems, we are allowing people to not be held accountable. Whether it's Democrats, whether it's Republicans, we have to have accountability. I want to make sure we defend the mom and pop businesses, which are the lifeline in this community. I want to make sure we have affordable housing. We just had affordable housing discussed. Affordable housing is a critical challenge in this district. I want to make sure we stand up for LGBTQIA rights. I want to make sure that we preserve Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. They're not entitlements. They are things that people have worked their entire lives to earn. That is not an entitlement. That is you getting what you built and you paid into. And the problem is that Republicans are really good at flipping the script. They're really good at messaging to people and convincing them that they are on the right side of things. We are the party that makes kids safe at school. We are the party that makes sure people can eat. We are the party that makes sure people have health care. But that has to be the message we get out to voters. Someone's got to take it to young Kim. Someone's got to throw some punches against young Kim. And that's what has to happen this election cycle. So I'll just end with this because I am very keen on the 5-minute time period here. My name's Christina Gagne, and if there's one thing you can count on in this election, I'm going to stand up for bullies. I'm going to make sure that this district is the last piece of the Orange County puzzle, because that's it. We flip this seat, we've got Orange County. We flip this seat, we take back the House. And if we're going to save, I think we're hearing this a lot, but I wholeheartedly believe it in my soul as a lawyer. I took an oath to defend the Constitution and democracy. We are going to save and defend our democracy one door at a time. So I just want to thank you this evening for your time. I'm happy to answer questions, but this is an opportunity for us to unite together, to stand up to bullies, and to finally take this seat. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christina. And we'll be hearing from other candidates in our subsequent meetings, in the next 2 meetings. Our next speaker is tonight's special speaker, and I will have our program chair, Joel Goldstein, introduce him.
John Gould is the dean of the very unique School of Social Ecology at UCI. He's a distinguished scholar in justice policy, social change, and government reform. He's held key positions in the Department of Justice and the National Science Foundation. He's the author of 5 books, more than 100 articles, on such diverse topics as erroneous convictions, indigent defense, prosecutorial innovation, police behavior, hate speech, sexual harassment, and international human rights. He earned a master's degree in public policy and a law degree at Harvard and a PhD in political science at the University of Chicago. Now, the last comment I'm going to ad-lib, I renewed my driver's license today at Costa Mesa. I saw a cross-section of Orange County. It doesn't look like this room. The poll that UCI does of Orange County reflects what the county is really like. Dean Gould's talk is titled "Purple is the New Orange," and I assume it will draw on the school's extensive polling of Orange County, and please give him a big welcome.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out today. When I say that I'm the Dean of the School of Social Ecology, the first question I always get is, what the heck is social ecology? And it's a good question. We are the only school of that name in the country. We date back to 1972 as a program became a school in 1992. Think of a school at the University of California, Irvine, as being a college. We have 3,000 students, and the best way to understand us, is that we are in translational science. We don't just study the problems that affect society, we also try to help solve them. And to that end, 2 years ago in 2023, we reinitiated something that the school had had in the 1980s and 1990s, and that is a poll across Orange County. And the question would be, why does Orange County need a poll now? Don't we kind of understand what's going on in the county? And the answer is we don't, and one of the reasons we don't is because of how the county has changed. So I am old enough, as I suspect a few of you are in this room, to remember when this county was a bright red county, where it went 80-something% for Ronald Reagan in 1984, when in fact he said this was the county where good Republicans went to die. Well, since that time, this county has become very different. As you undoubtedly know, it's the 6th largest county in America. Its economy would rate higher than 28 other states in the country. And it is now truly purple. Essentially a third Democrat, a third Republican, and a third independent, non-affiliated. I can't answer the question. It's always unclear to me why people can't answer that question. But we're only one of, well, actually, I'm not going to give this away. I'm going to ask you. And if you've heard me talk before, you cannot take a guess. Of the top 25 counties in America by population, how many are purple? And when I say purple, essentially it's Democrat, Republican, fairly even, and it kind of goes back and forth in terms of how it votes. How many of the top 25 are purple?
11.
So we have a 1 over here. No. We have an 11. No. 3. You are correct. Can you name the other 2? Los Angeles is definitely blue. Anyone want to take a guess? San Diego? San Diego, no. San Francisco, not. San Francisco? San Francisco's like the bluest county in America. All right, so, nope.
Jefferson County, Colorado.
One of them is Maricopa County, Arizona. That's Phoenix. And the other one is Tarrant County, Texas, which is Fort Worth. Now, I ask you, have either of those had television shows or movies written about them? We have, and so we are preaching Orange County exceptionalism at UCI. Because what the poll is useful for is several things. Number one, it helps show the rest of the country what's going on in a purple county, where the left and the right live near one another and have to find some way to collaborate, at least in business, if not in county government. Second of all, we are always looking at the big ticket issues that are affecting the county. So for example, homelessness, lack of affordable housing, brain drain, to find out not just what people think, because a pollster who simply tells you what you think is annoying. What we try to do is use the results to bring people together to talk about what did people think, what solutions have they considered, what messaging might work for them, and what are the no-go areas? What are things where you will never find any sort of agreement, so that we can have community leaders, business leaders, and electeds come together to figure out what do we do about these intractable problems. And just for fun, we also poll on some political issues, which is why I'm here tonight. I should add, I am here as a neutral party. I am here in my role as Dean of your University of California School of Social Ecology. I'm not here as a partisan, but I think you will find the information interesting nonetheless, because this poll has a lot of information that is relevant for people who care about not what's going on in the county, but what's going on in the nation. And I should tell you a little bit quickly about our poll, because polling's gotten a bad rap in America. My guess is when you get a call on your phone and you see it's a pollster, you don't pick it up. And that is true for most people in America. In fact, the response rate on most polls, and this is for any sort of survey, including when a business is calling is about 10%. So you're then going to ask, how representative can a poll be? Well, what we do is we use phone, we use text to web, we use panels, we use a variety of different methodologies. Our polls have about 800 respondents. I will not bore you with the methodology, but we weight it to known demographics in the county. The result is that the data I give you will have a confidence interval about plus or minus 3% each direction. So there is some wiggle room here, but we feel fairly confident in what I'm going to tell you. So we did a poll right after the March primary, and we did another poll right after the general election in November. And we were following 5 issues to see what would happen in March, whether it would continue in November. So the things we looked at were, number 1, who was going to turn out to vote? Number 2, would there be any gaps among the voters? So gender, age, college education, for example. Third, were Asian American residents and or Latino residents of Orange County moving in terms of their attachment to one or other of the political parties? Fourth, would Trump hold Republicans? And last, what besides the economy was motivating voters? So I'm going to take you through these as quickly as I can so we have some time for questions. So when we did our poll in March, we found a really interesting schism between residents and voters in the county. And by the way, I am not going to give you slides. I know everybody wants a slide. Everyone wants a PowerPoint. If you are one of our students, you absolutely want a PowerPoint so you don't have to take notes. So I'm not giving you a PowerPoint because I want to have us engaged in a conversation rather than you looking at a screen at numbers. I promise you everything I am telling you is available on a screen on our website. All you have to do is Google UCIOC poll, you'll find it. But I want to engage us in a conversation. So I said in March, we did a poll, and what we found was if we asked just adults in Orange County, Donald Trump had a 1% lead over Joe Biden. However, if we drilled down to likely voters were people who said there was about a 50% chance or greater that they would vote. Joe Biden had an 8% lead on Trump. Huge difference there between non-registered members or adults in the community and likely voters. All right, let's jump to November. We know that Kamala Harris won by about 2.6%. Now that's a significant difference from what we found in March. Now one answer might be, boy, did we get it wrong. We don't think we did. We think there are 2 explanations going on here. Number 1, Trump managed to turn out his voters better than anyone expected. And indeed, when we asked people, his voters were not only much more excited to go vote than were Harris's voters, they were much more likely to say they voted for him as opposed to against her. Whereas her voters told us they were voting more against him than for her. So that was number 1. Number 2, Harris was not as successful in turning out Biden voters. And we see this in a couple ways. Number 1, turnout was down 10 points in 2024 over 2020, from 87% to 76%. Within that, white voters who are much more likely to be Republican came out at much higher levels than did Latino voters or Asian voters. They were 12 and 14 points more likely to vote than Latino and Asian American voters. But the other big difference was turnout among age groups. So let me ask you, thinking about age groups, which group do you think was most likely to vote? Seniors, and you are all well schooled in this, and you're absolutely right. In our poll, 98% of registered voters over the age of 65 went out and voted. So congratulations to many of you. Who was least likely to vote? Give me the age group. 18 to 24, absolutely. What percentage of them voted in Orange County? Oh, I get this all the time. 12%. Young people suck, right? No, they won't go vote. Did they vote at lower levels than did the older voters? Absolutely, but they voted at about 2/3. So it was 2/3 of those 18 to 24 came out to vote, 72% of those 25 to 54, 86% for my demographic, 55 to 64, and I already mentioned that those over 65 came out at very high levels. So there is a significant age gap here in terms of voter participation. We'll talk about its significance later. In terms of gaps, once again, there was a gender gap, 11%. However, Trump did much better among men than we expected. He was running about even among men against Biden in March. He won men by 9% when we got to November. There was also an age gap in where people went, left to right. All right, so which group was most supportive of Trump? What age group? Oh, you are so wrong. You are so wrong. Seniors. Trump won seniors by 5% in Orange County. He won those age 55 to 64 by 3%. So what did we just see? Those who were most likely to vote were also those most likely to vote for Trump. The dividing line was 40 to 54. Now, you may ask, if the most likely to vote also voted for Trump, how is it Harris won? And the reason is because those young people, those 18 to 24-year-olds, went for Harris by 18 points in Orange County. Those 25, yep, those are either your children, your grandchildren, or people you see on the street. Those 25 to 39 went for Harris by 11 points. So the age gap continues to look the way we've seen it before, with young voters being much more likely to vote left or Democratic. Older voters were much more likely to vote Republican. There was also a college education gap, but not what we were expecting. So what we had seen in some earlier polling, and this wasn't just true here in Orange County, this was true nationwide, there was what we saw before the election, an age gap, that the college educated much more likely to say that they were going to vote Democratic. And this was true across races. What we saw in Orange County in November was there was a college education gap, but it was only among white voters. So white voters, those who went to college, 13 points more likely to have voted for Harris. No difference among non-white voters in terms of college educated versus non-college educated. Which then brings us to this question of, did we see any movement among Latino voters or Asian American voters? So we expected that white voters would go Republican, and they did. However, white voters in November were 4% more Republican than they were in March. Conversely, Asian American voters moved left. This is your left. So they were 5% more Democratic in November than they were in March. Now, the Latino voters were the ones who were the most curious, because you may have seen a lot of polling nationwide that has said Latino voters were moving to become Republicans. And it's really complicated, but really interesting here in Orange County, because Latino voters were 6% less likely to be Democrats or vote Democratic in November than they had been in March. However, when we then asked them, do you identify as Democrat, Republican, Independent, they are not, or they were not in November, saying they were becoming Republicans. They were moving away from the Democratic Party, but they were moving to Independent or no party preference. So this is a group, and we'll talk about this near the end, that is disillusioned, and they are very much a group that is up for grabs. This has been a historic Democratic constituency, and they're in motion right now. But at the moment, or I should say as of November, they may have been voting in fewer numbers for Democrats, but they were not yet identifying as Republicans at levels that would reflect that vote change. All right, speaking about identifying as Republican, we saw in earlier polling that strong Democrats and strong Republicans were loyal. They said they would vote for their candidate. But we thought that marginally attached Republicans might defect. Now, what does it mean to be a marginally attached Republican? This is not the same thing as someone who's an independent who leans Republican. This is someone where when we ask them, are you a Democrat, Republican, or independent, they say, I'm a Republican. And then we say to them, do you feel you're a strong Republican or not a very strong Republican? And they will answer, they are not a very strong Republican. The best way to understand these folks here in Orange County, these are George H.W. Bush Republicans. These are people who are Republican but are beginning to wonder what happened to their party. And we saw in earlier polling that they might be potentially up for grabs. So here's what we found in November. Strong Democrats, strong Republicans stayed with their nominee. So in March, 96% of strong Republicans said that they would vote for Trump. In November, 95% of them did. In March, 95% of strong Democrats said they would vote for Biden. 96% of them in November did. So if you are strong one way or the other, you stayed with your party's nominee. So when we came down to the not very strong Republicans, in March, 14% of them told us that they would vote for Biden. In November, 24% of them told us they had voted for Harris. So for you all, that's the good news. Here's the bad news. In March, 1% of not very strong Democrats said they were voting for Trump. In November, 10% of them did. So you all lost 10% of people who identify as Democrat, but not a strong Democrat in November. So that was an issue. All right, last. What were the issues that moved people? Earlier in the year, we asked Orange County residents what were the top issues, what were the big issues that were on their minds. And by far, not anything was close. It was the economy. 88% of Republicans and 87% of undecided said this was the number one issue for them. 70% of Democrats said this was the number one issue for them. Abortion was a big issue for Democrats. 65% of them said it was a top issue versus only 31% for Republicans and 45% for the undecided. You will not be surprised to hear that border security was a big issue for Republicans. 84% of Republicans, only 36% of Democrats, 46% of the undecided. When it came to Election Day in November, it was the economy, the economy, and the economy. And we asked this question two different ways. We asked people what was the top problem facing the nation and what was the top problem facing the county. Top problem facing the nation, inflation, cost of living, 42%. Next thing down, immigration, 22%. Next thing down, crime and public safety, 15%. What's the top issue, top problem facing Orange County? Inflation and cost of living, 43%. Next issue down, immigration, 28%. Crime, next one down, crime and public safety, 28%. So, economy, immigration, crime. And we know it other ways as well. So, let me ask this of you. We're going to see how you compare to Democrats up in Irvine, who I spoke to 2 weeks ago. Put yourself in your November self. So let's put yourself back in November, right before the election. In November, not before you watched your 401k start bleeding the last couple months, but in November. How many of you would say the economy was good or excellent? Raise your hands. All right, so that's a majority of you. You mentioned that this demographic does not represent necessarily the county as a whole. This is what your county, fellow county residents said. 31% said the economy was good or excellent. Only 20%, 2 out of every 10, said that their personal economic situation was better today than it was 4 years ago. As someone mentioned earlier, 14% of homeowners were worried about making their mortgage. Half of renters, who, by the way, reflect half of the population in Orange County, were worried about whether they were going to be able to afford rent. So for many of us, the economy's been okay, but for the vast, vast majority of Orange County residents, they didn't feel that it was. They thought two-thirds did not think the economy was good or excellent. 80% thought that their personal economic situation was worse in 2024 than it had been in 2020. For that matter, abortion was not the silver bullet issue for Democrats. Vice President Harris had put a lot into this. There is a little bit of good news in here in the sense, if you are pro-choice, in the sense that 70% of Orange County residents think abortion should always be legal or legal in most cases. Only 6% think it should always be illegal. So that sounds like, that issue could work for a Democrat, except that 35% of Trump's voters think that it should be legal in most cases, and 16% believe it should be legal in all cases. That's half of his voters. So abortion was not the issue that was going to move everyone, because it was one where the vast majority of residents here agree that abortion should be legal in at least most cases. All right, so I give you a lot of numbers. What's the bottom line? How is it that Trump wins nationally, but Harris wins slightly in Orange County, and yet 2 congressional seats here that are competitive go Democratic? All right, so if I'm being completely honest, in a 2-point race, and that applies not only nationally, not only the presidency here, and not only the congressional races, but in a 2-point race, anything's a possible source. So, you want to give me your hypothesis, unless it's that, spaceman came from Mars and tinkered with the election, I'll nod and say, could be. But let me suggest what I think was going on in 2024, and then we can talk in the question and answer about what that portends for the future. This was an election of pessimism. Voters were highly pessimistic. They were not happy about their economic fortunes. They had distrust in institutions that were supposed to help them out. When we asked people, do you think the United States is on the right track? 2/3 of residents said no. We asked residents, do you think California's on the right track? Slightly under 2/3 said no. Now, a plurality thought that Orange County's going on the right track, which I guess is good, but they were not happy with the economy, and they were not happy with institutions. What do you do when that happens? Either you don't vote, you vote to take out incumbents, you support the guy who wants to blow it all up, or as we have seen in other countries around the world, and I did used to work in human rights, there is a tendency when you feel like everything's going to hell to put your trust in one person. They can be the autocrat, but they're the ones who says, hey, I'll take care of it. You don't have to worry, I got it. And so that's the kind of the mood of the American population in November, and it's not surprising then to see an election result like that. Second of all, as I mentioned, abortion just didn't move voters. And there's an argument, I've heard this from some other folks, some other political scientists, that actually in states like Arizona, putting abortion on the ballot didn't help Democrats. Because what swing voters could do is vote for the pro-choice referendum and say, all right, I got that covered. Now I can vote for Trump because I got abortion covered. We don't have a real good answer on that, but it's at least something to put out there. All right, last thing we cannot ignore is, and this is not a new concept at all, is fears of cultural change. Now, this is, as I said, this is not a new issue. I am old enough to have had the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement, trans movements, all in my lifetime. And every single time that there has been a rights movement that has come up, there has been a backlash from people who fear losing cultural power. You all probably know the they-them ad by heart at this point that the Trump campaign ran. If you don't, go Google it. That is an example of leaning into a fear of cultural change argument. It was the single most persuasive ad that pollsters looked at during the 2024 election. Two other things also that I don't think we can ignore. Number one is that this was a Democratic candidate who was non-white, and to say that racism is over in America may not be acknowledging our history. And then I get to say this as the old white guy, we cannot ignore the power of misogyny in politics, or frankly, anywhere. So any number of those things is a potential explanation. I think the most powerful one was just a tremendous period of economic pessimism and distrust in institutions. So as we look forward, there are several things that we are going to be following in our polling. So number one, we are really, really interested to see whether Asian American voters in Orange County are truly moving left, or whether this was a reflection that two of the congressional candidates in 2024 were Asian American themselves. They may have brought out Asian American voters who wouldn't have voted otherwise, and they thought, well, maybe I am Democrat because I voted for Tran or I voted for Min. We're going to be tracking to see what happens there. Similarly, we are going to be tracking what's going on with Latino voters and residents here in Orange County, because what we saw in the poll in November from them is very much emblematic of a national trend. They are the epitome of disillusioned Americans right now. And the party that figures out how to speak to them and the leaders who can connect with them will be the ones that bring them along in 2026 and 2028. In addition, we are going to be looking at that group of modestly attached Republicans to see how they're reacting to things that are happening under the Trump administration right now. And finally, we're going to be looking at young people and how much they are distrustful of institutions. Because as we look forward, there are two kind of predominant models of how we could predict what would happen, what's going to happen. One is, if the future looks very much like the past, the likelihood is that when you put power, or when one party has complete power of two houses of Congress and the presidency, they tend to overplay their hand. If there is a recession on top of that, it's almost assured that the pendulum would swing back, and in 2026, Democrats would take the House. In 2028, they would probably be favored for the presidency. There's another model, though, where this disillusionment with institutions and fear that government is not working, and indeed fear about the concentration of power in big tech or other companies, ends up in a revolt against unchecked power. This would be people talking about Citizens United putting money in particular hands, about both parties being beholden to big donors, about the power of Musk, about Ellison, Bezos, government that doesn't address majority positions like abortion, gun control, or the popular vote. And when I talk to liberal groups, and you're the rare group here, when I mention that, I usually get this big applause. And what I say to people is, be careful what you wish for. Because if that gets unleashed, who knows what's coming? You think Bernie is lefty. I promise you, if those powers get unleashed, Bernie looks like a conservative. All right, so with that, I am going to stop. I assume I am over time. What professor ever stays within time?
Dean Gould, I did a little bit of research on you.
Uh-oh. Is this opposition research?
No. An admirable biography, I must say. So you were senior policy advisor in the United States Department of Justice. And in 2015, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts appointed you to a special committee of the federal courts evaluating something called the Criminal Justice Act. So I figure you're kind of like an insider when it comes to that. So my question, With something like 100 lawsuits being filed against the current administration, which are being ignored, blistering attacks on law firms and individual lawyers and judges, would you care to share your thoughts on whether the courts can actually uphold and protect democracy? Or are we entering a lawless state?
All right, so I am going to reject the premise of your question because it's not an either or. So let me answer the first. Actually, I'm going to answer this in different ways. I guess I'm going to be your politician by answering the question I want to answer. So question one, will the courts stand up for the rule of law? Yes, don't worry about that. You may not agree with some of the decisions, but judges will be judges. The more difficult question is what I think is behind the second piece here, which is what happens if an administration bucks the courts and says, John Marshall, you made your decision, let's see you try to enforce it. That's way back when, Andrew Jackson. The short answer is the courts have absolutely no power at all to enforce their decisions. I used to, way back when, give talks to visiting delegations of lawyers and judges from abroad to try to explain the American system of constitutional government. And I would say it stands only on the power of culture. If a president decides to ignore, the only recourse is citizens trying to hold a government accountable. Now, I cannot predict what is going to happen. I will say that if this administration chooses not to follow the Supreme Court, I would not be surprised to see the Dow plummet, because where is their full faith and credit in the power of the United States government? The answer really to your question is what would keep this a lawful society would be citizens holding the government's feet to the fire. That means protest of some kind. And I will say I had lunch with someone today who said to me, I'll just throw this out there. It's not, I'm still mulling over what I think about it. She said to me, look, the answer here is not Democrats. The answer here is whether Republicans are going to try to hold the president accountable. I think the real answer is, are citizens going to hold the president accountable? Now, I think we are way ahead of ourselves at this moment. Well, we can talk. At least let me give my argument, then you can tell me I'm wrong. We have seen an administration that is disagreeing with the judiciary, and indeed, the flights that went to El Salvador, there are some questions as to whether they were openly defying a district court judge. There are some questions as to whether this administration is directly challenging the court's authority. I will say so far, they are saying the right things in response to court decisions. Now, some of you may find some of their answers evasive and think they're trying to play cutesy, but I will say, reading the answers, they are trying to stay within the good graces of judges. So I do not think we are at the point yet where there is a constitutional crisis, but I certainly understand why many people think there could be.
Okay. All right, going back to the poll. What demographics does your polling reflect, and what methodology did you use?
Well, I thought I answered that. I'll try again, because
Well,
apparently...
and my question there, as far as seniors go, can you split that demographically? Seniors who voted for...
Sure. That's called a crosstab, and there's who's the crosstab exit? There he is. So yes, we can do that. All right, let me back up a second. People have a tendency sometimes to think on a poll, well, you just went and interviewed this person, or you went and picked this group. Polls are randomly asked of people. This is a random sample across the county. Now, when you get a random sample, you don't always get a group that reflects the full demographics of the county as you know it. So, for example, we all know from the census what percentage of the county is Latino or Asian American or white, what the age ranges are. So when we get our sample, and again, we do it through multiple methods, through phone calling, through text to web, through texting, through, it's called a panel. We then take those numbers that we have, and it's called weighting it. Just think norming it to the known demographics of the county. So our numbers are reflective of if we went out and interviewed everyone in the county. That's what a poll is doing. It is trying to give you a snapshot of what the numbers would look like if we went out and interviewed everybody that we're interested in. Now, within that, sure, we can break down those numbers I gave you by different groups. So, for example, if you want to know how white seniors voted, I have that information. If you want to know how Catholic voters between the ages of 50 and 64 voted, we have that. I'm just not snowing you with lots and lots of every little bit of data that we have tonight.
Okey-doke. Does your research support or oppose the recent research that smarter, more educated people vote more liberal?
Wow, I am not answering that question the way it was asked, because I have no idea what smarter means in that context. So we do know historically that a form of education is correlated with people being much more liberal. So people who have graduate degrees have historically been much more liberal than the population as a whole. We also know that the high school educated have not always, actually have typically been a little more liberal. What's interesting is college-educated voters used to be some of the more conservative Republican voters. Over time, college-educated voters have become more democratic, and the true Republican voter is someone who has somewhere between a high school degree and not quite a college degree. That's the sweet spot for Republican voters. Now, that is not to say we don't find Republicans among those with PhDs or with college degrees. It's just we're seeing these days that the sweet spot for Republicans are high school degree to not quite a college degree, so some form of college and an associate's degree.
All right. This is an interesting. Did the attempted assassination of Trump prove to be the winning influence in the campaign?
Well, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. At a two-point race, anything could explain it. We didn't poll on that question. So I can't really tell you that, but I will say in every poll we have seen, the economy was the number one issue. Moreover, if you followed tracking polls, Harris actually was leading for a little bit in there, which was well after the assassination attempt. So I guess I will say probably not, that the assassination attempt was not the, oh boy, I was about to say silver bullet, that's horrible. And I'm glad you all didn't hear that. The assassination attempt probably was not a deciding factor.
Okay, all righty. Back to the seniors that voted for Trump. Can you split that into the demographics?
Well, what
Like Asians?
could I
Latinos?
yeah, I don't have it
You
here.
don't have that data. Okay, all right. Okay. You said something interesting about the results of the poll in that UCI tries to bring people together based on the results.
Not the election polls, but the other ones. So for example, when we did the poll on affordable housing and homelessness, we did that in collaboration with the Orange County United Way. And so the United Way had a big gathering where we had elected officials, community leaders, business leaders to talk about how Orange County how Orange County residents think about this issue. And one of the things that was fascinating is top to bottom in the county, left to right, this was a big, big issue for residents. And in fact, when we did the next poll, which was on brain drain, whether people are thinking of leaving the county, and what we found, by the way, was that over a third of Orange County residents are currently thinking of moving away from the county, and another 16 or 17% had thought about it over the last 4 years because of the cost of living and the lack of affordable housing. So those are the big ticket issues here with people. When we did that poll, we did that in conjunction with a number of business groups. So we did that with the Orange County Business Council, the CEO Leadership Alliance of Orange County, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce, Bank of America, and UCI Health. And we went to various sites around the county to have conversations with electeds, with business leaders, with community leaders, to say, look, folks, this is what's happening in the county. This is what's concerning people. What are you going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? And so that's what it means when I say we bring people together. When we talk about the electoral poll, I just come out and talk to groups like you. And by the way, since I'm on YouTube, I'm happy to go talk to Republican groups about this too. I have not yet been invited to do that. But I'm waiting, because there's stuff in here that's important for anyone who cares about the county, about the country, about engaged citizenship. And I'll say it now, I would typically say it at the end. No matter whether someone's left or right, they ought to applaud what you're doing because you are engaged. You care. I mean, what is tonight? A Tuesday night? And you're out listening to me talk about this? You care, and that's what we all ought to be cared. That's what we all ought to be committed to.
We do care, no doubt about it. Okay, all right, Dean Gould, you spoke about cultural issues. Some people say that the Democrats should have leaned into being woke and defined it in terms of social justice, whereas we kind of crept away from it. What do you think?
Well, the term woke polls horribly. Just horrible, horrible, horrible. So if you want to lean into that, you need to take a page from a sociologist at Berkeley, George Lakoff, who has an entire book on messaging. And if you're going to lean into something, you need to lean into a description of it that is appealing to lots and lots of people. Woke is not appealing to lots and lots of people. Social justice may not be appealing to lots and lots of people. Opportunity is appealing to lots and lots of people. Providing a path to the American dream is typically appealing to lots and lots of people. So if you are going to go one way or the other, you need to pick the way you describe what you are through a message that is likely to bring in more people than create an us versus them, where you're the them and people don't want to be attached to you.
Yeah, we definitely need to grown up on our messaging. All right. Did the majority of women vote for Harris?
Depends whether they are white or not. So if they were white, no. If they were non-white, yes.
Okay, we have time for one more. Any input on restoring faith in institutions?
That is what I try to do every single day in my job. I am in the hope business. I know you all think I'm in the creating economic opportunity business, that I'm in the education business. I'm in the hope business. And I have 3,000 students right now who are worried about their country and are worried about what their place is in their country. And this is true whether they are Democrat or Republican. This is a group that is coming of age, having been through a pandemic, having seen their country split into camps that can't talk to one another, that hate one another in certain circumstances. They are looking at an economy that does not allow them the same quality of life that their parents have had. My guess is you know this just asking the question whether your children could afford to live here in anything other than the house you'll leave them when you die, because they probably can't. So if I'm in the hope business, and I think we all need to be, but as an educator, I have to try to convince them why these institutions are things they ought to A, learn about, and B, come try to help fix. And so I think the best thing you all can do is try to explain to young people how it can be better. The thing that does not work, and I've learned this as an old person myself, is you cannot tell them about the way it used to be when you were young. And how back in the day, when I worked in Washington, D.C., Democrats and Republicans, we could fight it out all day and still go out and drink at night, and it was wonderful. That's a world they don't understand. They don't recognize it. They haven't seen it. The question for them is, why should they buy into anything we're selling them? And the answer has to be because it can be better, and they can be the vehicle to help make it better. So I will leave you with that as the message. And thank you all very much for having me here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Gould, and thank you, Christina Gagne, for being here. And thank you all. I hope we see you next time. And don't forget to take your garbage. The Italian mother said so.